Welcome to this week's Curve in Conversation. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by another one of our incredible Curve associate artists. This time, it's Magson, who is responsible for casting all of the actors that you see in shows at Curve. So you might not know Kay's face. She works very much behind the scenes, but she is an invaluable member of the team at Curve. So welcome, Kay.
Hiya, nice to be here.
Thanks for joining us. So, thinking back, you studied Spanish and Latin American culture at university. How did you get into theatre?
Because when I finished my degree, I didn't want to leave Newcastle where I studied, so I did a bilingual secretarial course. And then I had an overdraft, so I went to work for a brewery, which then led me to work at the old Leeds Playhouse, because I used to go there with my work colleagues as a subscriber. And then I worked for John Harrison, who was wonderful, but he was in his 70s and he couldn't be bothered to go to theatre anymore. He'd done enough of that. So I used to go and write show reports. And then Jude Kelly was appointed, and Jude had worked with casting directors at the RSC. And she said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I think I want to do this." And that was it. I mean, it was just her taking a punt, really. So
wow.
That's how it started.
So tell us about those early years then at, well, it was West Yorkshire Playhouse, now Leeds Playhouse. It was such, it was sort of known as the National Theatre of the North back in its day when Jude Kelly was the artistic director there, and there was that incredible team of which you were part of. What were those sort of early days like when you were sort of forging this new theatre together? They
were slightly unreal, completely inspiring and completely knackering. Because it was a young team. I mean, there was myself, Dan Bates was the company manager, and we sort of grew up together in that building. And Jude was really good at doing the seemingly impossible. And she took you on that journey with us. So whether that was bringing over, I don't know, a lot of Nigerians to do the Wole Soyinka stuff that we did, whether that was sweet talking Tyrion McKellen to being part of an ensemble season, same with Patrick Stewart, whether that was to do with demanding that she could have rain and soak the audience and singing in the rain. It was all groundbreaking stuff that she was doing, you know. And so it was quite extraordinary. I couldn't do it now, but I was young then. It was like 30 odd years ago when it was new, it was innovative, it was exciting constantly. But even that's a bit tiring, as you know.
No, we can never have enough excitement.
Yeah, well.
And so how you sort of touched on this idea of the casting director, and perhaps it wasn't as well known a role as it is today, and it certainly wasn't considered an essential role like it is today. So how did you sort of move from being a secretary and writing the show reports into becoming a casting director?
Well, I don't know whether artistic directors, their brief changed and they became busier, and things just changed. I mean, in the 90s it was rare, but then the RSC and the National had casting directors. And then I suppose as those freelance directors who'd worked there went out to different theatres, that's what became the norm. So I suppose in a way it's, you know, I regard myself as a sort of, I do the admin, and I'm the sort of the audition host with creative input. And I think I'm the constant factor from the first phone call to checking availability, right the way through to making the offer and going to see the show. And I think that just became a role that seemed to become necessary. To do with the actor experience of the whole casting process, which is cruel, but we haven't really invented another way to do it. So if you've got a friend there, I think that's just helpful. So I presume it was like that for everybody else, that actually just sort of happened, seemed to happen naturally. I'm not aware that there was a great recruitment drive for casting directors. It just seemed to, like lots of people, like Sophie Marshall was an usher at the Royal Exchange and then fell into it as well as people discovered that that's what they loved doing, their interest. If they didn't want to be an actor or a director, there was another route to be part of that creative team.
Yeah. And had you always sort of been interested in the art of acting and actors? And, you know, you said you watched a lot of theatre. Was that always something you were sort of excited, inspired by?
Yeah, I mean, I think my interest was piqued. My dad, God bless him, was a shift worker. And I used to see him when he'd come home and we'd watch telly together. And he would spend ages going, what was that bloke in? Who's that? And I think I just picked up that bug. It became like our language. So then that sort of transferred into theatre. Because what I like about theatre is that you actually get to see the actors and develop a relationship with them, whereas in telly, I think it's very, very different because you're not there. You know, when I worked at the Playhouse, I'd be in at the crack of dawn to get some work done. Then I'd be there when actors started rehearsals. Then I'd be there, because then the whole culture shifts as the actors go home and the performers come in. So you could be there all day, but it was seeing them on their journey. And when I left the Playhouse, that's what I really missed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is that just that contact.
And how would you sort of describe your role to somebody who's not familiar with the role of a casting director? How would you sort of define and describe it, right from, you know, your sort of your early discussions with the director right through to opening night per se?
Yeah, well, as I said, I regard myself as a facilitator, an administrator, and an audition host with creative input. So I will discuss the play with the director, and then I'll go off, we'll write a breakdown together, and then that will go off to the agents, and that piques my interest in what I'm looking for. Then I'll shortlist, and the director and I will work on those shortlists to decide who we're going to audition. And I think the devil's in the detail. If you're thorough at that point, then it's a much more efficient process, and the people you do see, you get to spend more time with, because you don't have a finite amount of hours to audition. So, and it's all to do with instinct, I think, at that stage. You know, lots of people that we know, lots of people that I've seen or the director's seen, who we think, oh, they might be good, and we don't always get it right, but then they're in the bank for the next time we audition. Mm-hmm. And then the next step for me is then rechecking everybody's availability, rechecking that people can be away from home, because that's not necessarily a given. Then setting up the auditions, writing the brief, sending the brief out, sending the scripts, trying to make the audition day live, actually, so that you change things up. You have an instinct as to who to put when. As you know, when you know actors, you know who performs well in the morning. Like, never put a tenor in at 10 o'clock in the morning because they can't sing notes, but you put them in the afternoon. And then I book the rooms in consultation with the director as well, so that directors like to work in certain places, so do I. North of the river on my bus route, that's what I like. and then I'm usually, I'm almost invariably the person who goes out to collect actors, making some inane joke just to try and relax them a little bit, because they are terrified as they sit outside that room. And I don't think it gets any better. It possibly gets worse as they get older. Then I'll be the person who reads in the auditions. I'm not an actor, but I can read words, so that's about it. And I'm also there to listen and spot the signs when a director's given a very clear note, but the actor is so nervous they can't listen. So at which point I will ask the question, is this what you mean? I don't understand. Just to help, because, actors are so terrified. They can't, it's like anything we do when we're nervous. We just don't listen in the moment because we're worrying about what will happen next. Then I'll take people out, try and explain to them what's going to happen next in the process, because it can take a few days to come back with any decision. But I'll always let people know if there's no decision or when it's a no, and I'll do the feedback stuff. Then I'll get casting approval from whoever I need to get it from, do the offers, chivvy the offers when agents are sitting on them for whatever reason. I'll do the paperwork for the theatre. Then I'll usually, now my new modus operandi is to send a card to the company for first day rehearsals. I used to send it to every actor, but getting a bit expensive now. So now I send them a card saying, have a great time in rehearsals, have fun. And then I go and see the show. Not usually on press nights, because I don't like press nights. I think the actors have got enough pressure with the people they've got there. And I'd rather go on a Saturday matinee when actually what they're ready for is a friendly face. And I usually try and go into warm up so I've seen everybody. And then that one ticked off, and then I move on to the next one. And sometimes I'm juggling like 5 or 6 at the same time. But that's sort of the process, I think.
Yeah, thank you. It's a phenomenal amount of work. And I'm, you know, what I never see as a director is once that casting breakdown's gone out and you maybe get, I don't know, like we're doing The Wizard of Oz, you get like 2,000 CVs through. And then obviously by the time it sort of comes through to me, it's maybe 1,000, 1,500 at most. But you've already done a sort of amazing amount of sort of comprehensive detail and work just to get it to that stage. And then I think anybody just listening to you describing the process then would be struck by how much humility and grace and how much you empower the actors. And certainly I know that's the case from being in the room with you. And like you say, it's such a terrifying thing to go into. Yeah. And to give people their dignity is so important.
Yeah, I mean, one of my rules is the actor only leaves the room with the dignity that you allow them to leave with. So they must think that it's been the best audition in the world. Because how do you then, if they don't think that, how do they then go into the next one if they're lucky enough to have one? Plus, I always say that it's not to do with me in that room. I've already got the job. I'm doing the bit and I'm doing what I love. So it's to help the actor try and relax so that they can give of their best.
Yeah, you know? Because it's not like, I don't know, most folk may go for like maybe one job, you know, meeting, you know, interview maybe like once every 5 years or something. And I think for actor, if that, I mean, some people it's a job for life, isn't it? Whereas an actor, you might be going into 5 auditions a day. And I think the sort of effect that has on your mental health, I don't think it makes it easier going into room after room after room. I think, as you say, if anything, it makes it harder.
Well, I think because every room's different and every room has different rules. So I can't know what other people's rules are. I just know that be nice to people. Because ultimately, you know, actors crave an audition, but then they're terrified. And then if they're lucky enough to have another one, they've got to get themselves back up to speed for that next one. Or they might not have another one for a month. Mm-hmm. And they're both going to do their heads in, whatever way, you know, whatever situation they're in. It's like craving evil, because, you know.
Yeah. And do you think your audition room has any rules? You talk about sort of rules. Do you think yours has any sort of rules around it, or?
It's only got rules like don't be late, do your prep, use me. I'm your first friend in the process. And then the audition brief that I send out is your and that's your best friend. So I try to make it as easy as possible. You know, I'll say what room it is, how to get into the building, you know, all that stuff. And things like, you know, it's the actor's time. It's not my time. It's the director's time as well. However, there's a different agenda going on. Mm-hmm. So if as an actor you can take control of the space, then I've done my job properly, I think. You know, it's like, you know, moving the chairs. It's like, I don't know, just having water there, all those simple things, having scripts for them to read, because iPads freak me out when people are trying to read from something electronic. Too old for that. I don't do what the technology.
But it's that attention to detail, isn't it? And care and humility and respect for the artist who's coming in and is ostensibly expected to be vulnerable and very open in a very sort of condensed sort of period of time. Yeah,
I mean, I'm very good at talking to the girls when they come in about their handbags and their shoes, and the guys about their shirts. And then when I go out, I'll find something. I've usually done my homework. So if I know someone on their CV, I'll have made a note, and then I can say, oh, you know, you've worked with my friend, whoever, just so that it feels more normal. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things I make myself do, because they're a human being. They're not a commodity. And I think in a lot of our business, they are treated as a commodity because that's how they're regarded. Mm-hmm. And if theatre ever gets like that, then I'm going to work at Tesco. I'm not.
And I think your sort of love for actors and respect for their work is very clear. Is that the thing you sort of enjoy most about your role? What's the most satisfying part for you?
I think so. I mean, one of my best friends always calls me Miss Fix-It because I like to make calm out of chaos. And so I suppose that's what I'm doing. That's what my job is. It's to try and control the situation and make it the best for everybody. But actors fascinate me because I couldn't be one and I wouldn't know where to start. And I don't have the mental strength nor emotional strength to live their life. I couldn't. So I'll have my security and I'll try and influence by doing what I do well. But I couldn't be an actor. I couldn't go on that roller coaster journey. You know.
Yeah. No, nor me. It's incredibly challenging, and I just think, especially when we're doing like a musical, and you might be seeing, I don't know, 20, 30 people a day, and it's sort of. Yeah. And then when we're like casting, I don't know, something like Grease that we've just done recently, or West Side Story, where it's predominantly a young company of actors, and you sort of think you've got quite a good knowledge of who's around, and then obviously every year there's like 10,000 at the very least new faces coming into the profession, and that's kind of overwhelming for us. And from their point of view, it must just be sort of even more so.
Yeah, the difference is that we're not in competition, whereas they are.
Yeah.
That's what, I mean, I've got friends who are actors who I've never cast, but I've met them so often, and then you meet them socially because they're a friend of whatever, because there are just so many actors. Mm-hmm. But, I was amazed when we did West Side, actually, how well we did with those youngsters, because it was a tough brief, singing that score, dancing that choreography, and acting that stuff. But actually, we did really well, I think, because kids are out there. You've just got to spend the time finding them and being open to people recommending people. Because if you respect an artist in the business, they will recommend the right people because they respect you. It's all a team effort.
Yeah. And I think we've had some incredible moments together, haven't we, where you do meet that new person, or the person who's just graduated, or somebody who's maybe come from a less traditional route into the theatre, and they just cast their spell. And I always find that such an honour to be in those rooms when, Adriana comes in for Maria in West Side Story, and, you just sort of, those are the moments you treasure forever, really.
Yeah, that still makes me want to cry. She came in with no agent, needing a visa to come back and work. And it was a gift for me, because normally I make the offers to the agents. I don't hear an actor's reaction. But we were both in tears when I emailed her and said, do you want a job? It was quite extraordinary. And those are the special moments, because it's about people, and it was, it proved to be a brilliant risk to take. But, she was completely untutored. She was trained, but she didn't know any of the rules of theatre. And I think it was lucky that she was put opposite Jamie, who's got a track record and knows what he's doing. But there were lots of youngsters in that show, and actually led well with the older actors taking responsibility and setting a good example. They seemed to fly.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an incredible company, and they were just... Yeah, they were absolutely sensational. For any of us who were looking to see the production, they were just incredible, and we'll remember it forever.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about a musical then. Are there sort of major differences when you're casting a play and a musical, for example? What are the sort of new challenges that one presents?
I think it's the same process. It just takes a different length of time. So for a play, you get people in, you'll have sent them slides, you'll have a chat, they'll read. Then we might work on what they've prepared, some notes, all that sort of stuff. We might do recalls, though I never like to say we're definitely doing recalls, because if you say that, you will do them. And sometimes it's so obvious, you can just make the decision. Sometimes we'll bring people back in pairs, like when we did My Beautiful Laundrette, it was important that the two guys had a chemistry together and looked good together, and that was great. We did that. That worked well. On a musical, there are just more rounds because you're going for the triple threat. So you're going for someone who can act, sing, and dance. So you can't do it all at once. So you either sing people first in really quick slots just to check the notes, and then you'll do a dance call. And usually with that, it's the cruel thing that you always make me sort out, is that you do cuts after certain stages. But I notice I'm always the one who gets to do that and tell people to go home. But they know it. They're, you know, people who are in musical theatre know how it works, and it is cruel, but they get it.
Mm.
Then you'll start to hone it down, and you'll start to do things like you'll send people show music. Sometimes we do dance recalls, not very often, because you sort of know, but we can do that as well. Then people will come back, either prepare stuff from the script, although you've got a much better system, which is getting them to write their own monologue, because quite often the dialogue in a musical, I'm reading in with them more than they're saying, and it's sort of pointless, out of context. So getting people to write a monologue about the character they're being seen for is brilliant, because A, it makes them think about the role, B, it makes them think about the context and the social context of what it is, and then it shows how creative they are, which is brilliant, you know. And it can't be wrong. That's what I always tell them about a monologue. It can't be wrong. We just want to see you, and that's the bit that they can control. They've not got me reading opposite them. They've just got to prepare something and deliver it. And if they can do that, then they're halfway to the job, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's so hard, the audition process, isn't it? Because really what you want to see is vulnerability, and you want to get a sense of the human being that you're going to be creating and working with. But the whole idea of going into a dance call or going into a room for 5 minutes sort of makes you present a version of yourself rather than just be yourself. And I think that's sometimes the key we have to really unlock.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other difference between a play and a musical is that the decision process on a musical can just be longer, especially if it's a big commercial musical, because the producer, the rights holders may need to get involved and watch tapes, whatever. And then just satisfying the director, the choreographer, and the MD. So, and it's all about compromise. Nobody ever gets, or very rarely gets, the perfect creature. But you just make it work. You know, it's to do with artists knowing themselves and knowing what they can get an actor to deliver.
Yeah.
And it's having that confidence. You know, as a director, you get a sense of what sort of a performance you're going to get. A choreographer knows how much teaching they're going to have to do. Musical supervisor knows, well, they might have to tweak the ranges a little bit, but actually, if it's the right person, they don't mind that work to make it happen. You know, some notes in musical theatre are impossible to sing.
It's that B flat in Aspects of Love, yeah.
Yeah. And the terror with which actors approach that note.
Yeah, especially at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Absolutely, yeah.
And what are your sort of top tips for an actor coming into an audition? What would you sort of say are the do's and don'ts for a successful audition?
Well, I guess the don'ts are the flip side of the do's. So read the brief. As I said before, the brief I give people is their best friend in the world, because it's what they take into that audition. And if you do what it says, then you're halfway there, really. Don't be late. Just that, to me, I can't bear. And give yourself time when you get to an audition to calm yourself and prepare yourself. Give yourself time if it's a musical to warm up. Give yourself time if you're an actor muso to tune the instrument rather than doing it in the room, because it wastes time and then you feel uncomfortable because you're using people's time for that. I think have everything with you that you need and know where it is. Because, if you need glasses, you need glasses. I wear glasses, doesn't matter, but have them. Don't apologise for them. I'd rather someone wore their glasses and could read the script than didn't have them on and we're making it up, because we can see you with or without glasses. Doesn't matter. It's not a character choice necessarily. And have your sides there. There'll always be sides in the room, because I said before, I don't like people doing stuff off their iPad because I'm waiting for it to crash, and then I get freaked out. But if you want, mark up your sides. I'll always give you. we'll always pick scenes so you know what to prepare, so it's not as much to print off, or they'll always be there in the room for you. And I think the other thing is listen to the director. It's hard, and that's why I'm there to pick up the slack and go, is this what you mean? When I know they just haven't tuned in quickly enough. And then the biggest thing I think is don't blag. Mm-hmm. Don't lie, don't embellish your CV, because we all know each other. I did a talk once and an actor was appalled that I said, oh, well, we will ring and check and get a reference for someone. Do you? And it's like, well, not often do you appoint someone for 3 months' work on 20 minutes. So, of course, we check. And we're not checking whether people can act or sing or dance. What we're checking is, are they going to be a nice person to be in a rehearsal room with and in a company? I mean, I see them once in the audition, and I see them on stage. But directors, choreographers, MDs, everybody else, stage management, have got to be in that room all the time with them. And then everybody in your building has got to deal with them. And so, of course, don't blag, because we'll always find out. And at the first sniff of bullshit, that's it, I've turned off. It takes a lot for me to go, oh, well, maybe. And I think, when people ring me and say, what was so-and-so like, you have a responsibility to be honest, but honest in context. Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, they were having a bad time. Well, there was someone else in the whatever. I mean, I'm always willing to give people a second chance, but it can be hard. It can work against you. Like those actors, we know you mention something on a CV and then they go into an all-out attack on how awful it was or whatever. No, don't. You wouldn't do that in a job interview. Don't slag people off. And I think they're basics. I understand why actors do it, because they're nervous and they get a little bit of verbal diarrhea, and then they've got themselves to a place where they didn't want to be, but they can't pull it back. Mm.
Yeah, and I think it's so, because like you say, we've got 4 or 5 weeks to get on the show, and if you've got somebody within a company who, as you say, you may have met for 20 minutes, half an hour, if they're obstructive or obstreperous or combative in that space, it can have a very detrimental effect, not just on the relationship between actor and director, but indeed the entire company in the room, the stage management team, the entire building. So I think it's right that we sort of, we do a bit of a background and just check that people are going to be collaborative and friendly and hardworking, because it's such a short space of time to do something incredibly complicated.
It's like a pressure cooker, isn't it? It can be a rehearsal room. It is in terms of the scale of the work you've got to achieve. But in the same way, if you can meet an actor in auditions who knows who they are, can think outside the box. So, when you give people the references to read and to prepare, I always put in my brief, read the script, because it isn't a given. And I don't know how you audition for a specific role if you don't know where that role sits in the whole play. You've just got to think outside the box a little bit, bring your own experiences to the part that you're up for. And I think just take more prep time than looking at a side of notes the day before. Just give yourself a fighting chance and demonstrate why you must be cast. In that audition, it's in your hands, really. Mm-hmm. And it isn't, I'm not saying it's not easy, but you just give yourself time. If you don't have to answer a question immediately. You can take a beat to digest that question. And you don't necessarily have to have the right answer. There isn't a right answer sometimes. It's a director testing whether they want to engage in this two-way artistic relationship.
Yeah, I think that's so right. And often we've been in a room, whether it's, maybe a musical is a good example, because maybe somebody sort of messes up on the choreography or can't quite hit the note, and you and I have seen somebody in that person, because the way they've spoken about the piece, or the way they've spoken about the character, or maybe they've prepared a monologue which has shown real sort of insight and integrity and a real imaginative sort of vulnerable approach to the work, and it's meant that we've ostensibly ended up fighting for them in the audition, you know, room, and cast them because we've seen vulnerability and a real sort of spark that we've then felt we're able to invest in and spend time with and really, you know, work with.
And it's all, I don't think it's ever not paid off, really. Because, you know, or you'll go, well, actually, we'll recall this person. And then you structure the audition to put them at their ease, get them over what went wrong. It's usually to do with notes. And actually, the musical directors we work with are always, they're always generous and will give a second chance in the room. And sometimes it's just a case of getting them to bring different material in.
Yeah.
Maybe not the same song because you're going to dry on the same note every time, you know.
Yeah. And it's been wonderful. There's so many opportunities we've been able to give to, for example, young people graduating from drama schools, or young people maybe who haven't even been to a drama school who have come to us through whatever route. You know, I can think of so many that we've been able to give sort of leading roles to, or, you know, first opportunities or breaks. And they've been, you know, absolutely incredible. And it's about investing in that talent and being able to sort of support it, and it's the most wonderful thing.
Yeah, and also I suppose that I haven't really thought about it before, but the importance of that experience on a first job, because actually, you know, you're in a very precarious profession. You've been to drama school, you're coming out of that, and you're all hopeful. Then you have to learn new rules of life when the structure goes. Then you get your first job, and if it's then you don't enjoy it for whatever reason, that's a long way to pick yourself up from, having been so high because you got the job.
Yeah. And you've given great thoughts and advice on the actual audition of, on the actual process of auditioning. What sort of advice and thoughts have you sort of picked up over the years in terms of how people can sort of stay match fit in between auditions, and what sort of things they might be able to do, you know, if they are going through a period of not, well, I mean, I guess at the moment we're all in lockdown. What can actors be doing to sort of keep their skills up?
Well, I guess I'd say go to classes when you can afford to go to classes. Go to as much theatre as you can afford to go to. And the bit you get for free is talk about theatre as much as you can. Not just to other actors or business professionals, just talk about theatre. Because that, and go to things that you think, well, I'm not sure about this. You know, when you've been to drama school, you've got lots of mates who will always be in things. There's a big fringe scene that's cheaper. You'll always find something, you know, you'll come into contact with new writers, different directors, and you're building up a catalogue, or a back catalogue of information. I'd also say read plays. You know, they're not hard. We do still have libraries, but you can read anything online. Just be familiar with different writers, you know, keep your eyes on who seems to be trending, or, you know, read Shakespeare. That's my worst nightmare, but you've got to keep that acting muscle active somehow. And some of the stuff you can do for free, really.
Yeah.
You know.
And obviously you cast more or less everything we do at Curve. What is it about Leicester and coming to Curve that you enjoy? Why do you sort of enjoy being part of the team at Curve? What does it mean to you, I guess? I
think because I was lucky. I was so lucky to start my journey at Leeds Playhouse and then West Yorkshire Playhouse. And Curve's the nearest I've found to that spirit. It's got the same building ethos in terms of, you know, we didn't at the West Yorkshire, we didn't have a stage door. It was the reception desk, so everybody came into the building at the same point. It's got a great community facility and an active programme that I think is now going to become very, very crucial when we get back on our feet. But it's that sense of, when I come to the theatre and I sit, I'm in my jacket potato or whatever, it's the breadth of people in that theatre from all different walks of life and background. And the staff as well, everybody's really friendly, everybody's very approachable. And it reminds me, I mean, actually, when I do stuff at Derby, it's the same thing. When I do stuff at Chester, they're the places that I know best because I do the most work for. And it's a joy to be a part of it, because you feel a part of it. You know, I'll come to Curve and people, the lady behind them in the cafeteria has now learned who I am and what I do. And to my shame, I can never remember her name till you remind me. But it's that, things like that, because I'm coming, I don't know how many miles, 150 miles. You know, when I was at the Playhouse, everybody knew who I was because I was part of the fixtures and fittings. But I think Curve has that same spirit, because it's people-led and not, I was going to say not business-led, of course it's business-led, but you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Everybody gets their coffee in the same place, everybody walks around. I imagine doors are open if people have got problems. It's that sort of thing. It's, you know, I don't think actors aren't in the business to make money. The ones who do, it's great, and their success is still hard fought. But I think I think as well, you know, everybody gets paid the same, which is really helpful, because then you're in it together, and that's the sense of that's the spirit of the building. I think that's why I like it.
Well, we more than like you. We absolutely love you. Thank you, Kate. It's been such an honour to speak to you this afternoon. It's really inspiring to hear from you. So, Kate Magson, thank you very much.
No, thank you.